Hey guys, it's Tish here, and welcome to DevOps 101, episode 3. We're going to be discussing why I chose DevOps engineering over software development. And if you're a new listener, then my name is Tish, and I've been a DevOps engineer since November 2021. I'm a junior DevOps engineer, and let's get straight into the episode. So, there's a number of reasons why I chose not to pursue a software development or software engineering route. For the purposes of this podcast, we will just call it software dev. The terms are usually used interchangeably. So first, let's just briefly talk about the differences between software development and DevOps. And previously, so last week, we did touch on we spoke about why DevOps engineers were needed, and we spoke about what their sort of roles and responsibilities were. And in the first episode, we did talk about what DevOps actually is and what it sort of entails. So what does a software development do, and how does it differ from DevOps? And the software developer is an IT person, right, who develops, maintains, tests, and evaluates essentially computer software, computer applications. So that in itself there are some terms there that kind of may overlap with DevOps, but it's sort of what you do day to day and your roles and responsibilities that are very vastly different. We'll get on to, like I said, we'll get on later on why I didn't pursue that side of IT. And, I did a computer science degree, as you may know, and, that covers a lot of mathematical stuff, algorithms, coding, that kind of thing, and we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so software developers, they're doing these things to essentially create and maintain code for a software or computer system. And there's usually two types of, I would say, software developers. You've got an application engineer, and you may have a systems engineer. And usually the application engineer is the person that is, writing code for an application. And then the systems engineer is just an engineer who may be writing code to ensure that the systems can sort of, can sort of handle the application. So they're looking at not necessarily the back end, but they would usually work closely with the applications engineer and look at the system that sort of is the back end of the application. So the roles and responsibilities and the knowledge you would need to sort of to be a software developer is you'll need to understand data structures and algorithms. So that's something that I actually learned in. When I was a student. I was learning, data algorithms, data structures, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I just did not get on with data structures and algorithms. And I kind of went into a computer science degree wanting to build all these fancy applications, and that was what I wanted to do essentially. Underestimated degree for sure, but so they need to have that knowledge, and especially when you're building applications, they will also implement technical designs. So like with any engineer, there's always going to be that design aspect where, if you're a DevOps engineer, you need to have a little bit of understanding of the architecture of what may be involved in the DevOps tools, the cloud tools that might be needed to be that infrastructure for the application. It's the same thing with software developers. They will need to be able to implement a design for the software that they're creating, or the methods, or if they're wanting to improve on something, does the design element need to be changed for the improvement to be made? So they could be visually displaying for like, anyone that needs to have a look at sort of the structure of that application. They're going to improve and maintain code. They're essentially going to be, doing code review changes, and that's just as simple as someone's made a commit. You're going to want to make sure that someone on your team, that, their code meets the right standards. You're going to want to make sure that their code is okay for the pull request, or for whatever changes need to be approved. And, you're going to need to be able to write new code as well. Like, even though you're maintaining code and improving code, you're going to still need to be able to write, brand new code, new functions, new methods, new whatever it is, to get that application, give it a new feature, whatever it may be. They're going to need to be able to do that. And by no way am I saying a software developer is a front-end developer. That's completely two different things, by the way. So you may have, for example, on a web application, you don't really call them software developers or software engineers. You would call them front-end developers or web developers. So let's just get that out of the way before people, before you might have the wrong idea with that. And we're talking about people that are writing code to create applications, usually computer applications or system applications, not so much web applications. Although you can have software developers who are working on web applications and are working on other things within the web application, whereas a front-end developer is literally just working on the front-end elements of that web app. And then, you need to be able to identify issues with, the software and operations sort of process that is currently within the team. You need to be able to maintain that, that communication, and you need to be able to see where improvements need to be made. And lastly, I said that need to be able to coordinate the installation of the software. So let's say you're writing an application, or let's say, for example, Microsoft 365 didn't exist, and you was going to be, let's say you was going to be you were working on the team that was developing Microsoft 365 for in the cloud, so Office applications in the cloud, right? You would then need to ensure that you can coordinate the installation for customers. So that is sort of the knowledge and the roles and responsibilities of a software developer, right? Now we're going to just briefly go over what DevOps engineer does and their roles and responsibilities, and then we'll sort of do a little bit of a comparison so that we could compare, and then I can speak about the things that I do and dislike from both sides, to be honest, and then I could give you my overall reason why I chose DevOps. So the DevOps engineer is literally someone that does both development and operation. So they do things that are part of development and do things that are part of operations. And we did speak about that in the last podcast. And, you know, they will work on the code as well, sometimes with the development team. So if there was a software developer on your team, most likely, because DevOps engineer works within usually a product team of other developers, etc. So you would usually be working on some of the code base. You wouldn't be writing any code for an application per se, but you usually would be working through some code base that the developer might have, created, so that you can have a better understanding of how to build that project in the cloud through pipelines, etc. So DevOps engineers will also oversee sort of the process for proper integration of running the software and the application. So they will oversee the process to essentially get the application deployed and oversee the process of maintaining the application, using whatever infrastructure it is using. So that's just a little summary. DevOps engineer will be maintaining the infrastructure and also the deployment and also the maintenance after deployment. And the skills and sort of roles and responsibilities DevOps engineers need, for sure, need programming skills, right? When they say programming skills, you don't need data structure and algorithm knowledge to be a DevOps engineer. You don't need to know how to apply those methods to the way how you'll be scripting in a DevOps engineer job role. You just need programming knowledge because you need to be able to read code, and you need to be able to understand how code is written. Not necessarily be able to write in loads of different languages, but you need to just be able to understand basics of programming, the concepts, and how to write code. So if it's Python, for example, you want to be able to, even if someone wrote a complex Python program, you still want to be able to be like, right, I can go into that program and start reading things and maybe getting a little bit of an understanding. And that will be based off because you've been reading Python over a long period of time. It starts to become like English, it becomes that language where you're familiar with. You want to have a familiar understanding of the language, and then you'll be able to understand how to write it, and you'll be able to understand how to use it, how to manipulate it, that kind of thing. So DevOps engineers do need management, and you need to be able to manage your time. I think that goes with a lot of jobs, to be honest. A lot of jobs in IT, you need to be able to manage your time. You need to be able to understand the management of tools. You need to be able to understand agile process and DevOps processes, how the two sort of can work together and how they might not work together. You know, if you can understand that, you could walk into a company and say, maybe you could suggest improvements, or you can suggest ways of doing things differently, because to suit DevOps process, right? So, for example, in DevOps, we kind of use Kanban process, but in software development, you probably use agile process. And this is just a way of sorting out what tickets how your tickets are created, the process, not for you writing code, but the process for how you manage what comes into a sprint, what comes out, all that kind of stuff. You have these different processes, and it's good for a DevOps engineer to understand both Agile and DevOps methods. You want to be able to manage cloud deployment. So this is essentially being able to understand cloud deployment. So understanding, if it's AWS, Azure, understanding the different tools that you can use with deployment, whether it's deployment of the application or just maintenance of that deployment. You need to be able to understand that. And another thing that doesn't really get spoken about often, you need to be able to understand the maintenance and compliance of the application and the security. All the VMs you're using, are there EC2 instances, which are also VMs? It's just Amazon's way of calling it. Are they patched up? Are they on the latest version? Have you ensured that Log4j2 is being patched? All those kind of things. You want to make sure that these things are maintained properly, scheduled, and you want to make sure, if my developer on my team locally is using Node.js, let's say, for example, version 16.14, right? But then the pipelines deploying the application, running and building the application is using a latest version of Node. You want to make sure that that's a process right there. You want to make sure that that process is aligned. So developers, operations, and what we do, we want to make sure everything is aligned so that there's no issues when they're working locally, and there's no issues when the code is built in a pipeline. So those are the key differences between software development and DevOps. And you can see that software developers do not work. They might work with cloud tools, right? They might, for example, they might go into Azure or AWS or the portal for whatever. But they're not going to be the ones making the changes or, saying, okay, we need X, Y, and Z set up. They can recommend that, or they could say, oh, we need a new environment. But DevOps are the ones that are going to be creating the environment, deploying the environment, maintaining the environment. The software developer just focuses on the application that they're building and maintaining. And that's the key differences. Now, we'll come on to my likes and dislikes for software development. So for me, the one thing that I really enjoyed on my degree was that coding challenged me. Coding made me more analytical. It pushed me to think more logically, and I got to learn a various different languages. I got to learn OOP languages, I got to learn procedural-based languages, I got to learn scripting languages, I got to learn various different types of languages. And then you quickly realize certain languages are for certain things, you get more use out of one language over another, right? So it's not to say that two languages can't do the same thing. It's just one might be more easy to do it in and the other might be more complicated. And that's what I really liked that's really the only main thing I'd say I liked, because I love learning in general. I loved learning different things on the degree. But what I didn't like was the degree was, it's based on science and fact, and it's based on maths, and it's based on I enjoyed school, right? But I didn't really like too much of the whole maths thing. Like, in terms of, I wasn't like fascinated by maths or anything like that. And I wasn't until after school, right? Well, I'd say it wasn't until college when I was doing my BTech, which is the equivalent of A levels. So it's when you're age 16 to 18, you go to college and you do your subjects or whatever. I didn't choose A levels, I chose BTech. And I did a software development course where it was like 100% coursework. And it wasn't until then when I realized, oh, maths is actually like needed for development, for the way how you think and the way how you apply logic to code, essentially. And I didn't realize that until I went to university, really, like how much maths is involved. And I didn't really like that. I kind of felt cheated, not gonna lie. But that was really the main thing I didn't really like was like the maths, but it was hard. And I'm not saying I didn't like I didn't like computer science because it was hard. It just was hard anyways, period. And I'm not saying that the reason why I don't like software development is because I did a computer science degree. What I am saying though is that doing the computer science degree did not push me in the direction of becoming a software developer, even though most of my classmates are probably software developers now. And then some of them I know are using some DevOps tools as part of their job role. But for the most part, there is a clear distinction between the software development and DevOps engineer in like more well-rounded teams kind of thing. But most people do go out and become software developers or software engineers, and it's like good for them. I went into IT because I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and like I kind of like was like, okay, all I know is that I enjoy Python. What can I do with it? And the first thing that came was networks, because that was my most favorite enjoyable module at uni. So I was like, okay, I'll pursue a networks like engineer like career. So I started studying CCNA, and then I got really, really bored. So I just didn't bother with that. And once it took me probably about 2 years to realize that I didn't want to be a network engineer, because it's so easy to go on one path and get like sort of stuck down it. So anyways, I decided, right, what can I still do with Python? What can I still do? I love automation. I like writing in Python. I like scripting, right? What can I do? So I then came across DevOps, and I was like, okay, this is like completely new. Never even really heard of the term DevOps. Never heard of what it actually was or anything. And then I kind of rode with that and kept going. And I was like, right, I'm going to get my certifications. I'm going to start learning DevOps, what it means to be a DevOps engineer, and get the ball rolling in that. And that's what then led me to just enrolling on the boot camps on Udemy, the ones that I advertise them on my YouTube channel. So if you're listening on YouTube, they'll be in the description below. And if you're listening on Spotify, then head over to my YouTube channel, which is TechyTish. So yeah, so literally I just had like, I was like, right, I've put my focus on DevOps, and this is what I want to do. And I didn't just was like, it wasn't like sort of like an overnight decision. It was more like I needed to research what it was and try and get my head around it. And then I like took the plunge to apply for jobs and all that kind of stuff. So that's what led me onto this journey. And then when I finally got the job where I'm currently working as a junior DevOps engineer, that's when it was like game changer. Like, honestly, my life has changed, and it's changed for the better. And this will lead me on to sort of like progression and benefits. And I'm not saying software developers don't get paid loads. You can be a software developer and get paid like a ton of money, right? But DevOps engineers are a special niche. It's like way back when, like before AI and stuff, and people wanted people that were really good at maths, but also really good at coding. And they wanted to get them into big data and AI, and how can we process a huge amount of data faster, right? If you had that skill set, that was a niche, and it still kind of is, to be honest. You don't go to uni to do a degree on big data and how to handle that. At least I don't think so. At least to the best of my knowledge, I don't think so. But what I am saying is that, you know, you will do, you know, for me, DevOps engineer is that niche, and it's a niche because you need to understand development and operations. But if you don't understand either, if you don't understand operations, or you've never really been involved with the operations team, but you are a developer, it'll be easier to make that transition into DevOps, I'd say. But if you are in operations and you don't know anything about development, it'd be a little bit harder, but you would just need to make sure that you get onto the development side of things, and, you know, just maybe start creating some applications of your own. You know, don't need to, you know, be spending money or anything, but just enroll onto some courses and build some applications and understand the fundamentals, at the very least understand the fundamentals of development. Because some people I work with, right, my colleagues, they're not developers by any means necessary. They've never even been a developer. I've never been a developer either. In terms of like professionally, I've never been a developer. But I have that experience from the degree and stuff like that. And then in my own time, just creating Python applications and, you know, utilizing my Python skill set. And they are really good now at like just like programming in general, because they can read the programming language very well. So, and when it comes to DevOps on the job role, you need to know how to script. You need to understand the basics of Linux, and you need to understand just programming at fundamental, because to write YAML files, you are applying concepts of programming. It's like, for example, when I first wrote a pipeline, also known as a YAML file, I wrote it in a way where I was trying to utilize not having to rewrite code. So, you know, the use of if statements apply, you know, for example, if you wanted to build an application but you wanted to only, I don't know, deploy something to based on if what environment was selected. So you could list variables and then say, if dev environment is selected, do X, Y, and Z, or else if, or only do X, Y, and Z if X, Y, and Z happens. So you still got that mentality that you apply in DevOps. So that's why I think it's important that you do have a little bit of understanding. You know, DevOps is a lot. It's development and operations. Don't try and do everything at once. Just pick one thing, learn some of that. Don't try and learn all of it. You're not going to learn all of it. Just try and learn the fundamentals. Do a bit of project work on that, or like try and apply your knowledge in practice. So if you need to learn how to build pipelines, understand what YAML is, understand exactly what is even going on in a pipeline. Understand that, just read it through, watch videos, then try and write one yourself. And once you write one yourself, and then you keep writing them, and then you don't need to write one from scratch. Maybe copy and paste one and see what happens when you change certain things. Understand how things are run, understand how you can test parts of that pipeline, those kind of things. Then you'll get onto writing it from scratch yourself. Like when I first started, I didn't write no pipelines from scratch. I was utilizing existing pipelines and like rewording things. Then now when I have to write new pipelines from scratch, I know how to do that because I've been doing it for a while, and it just becomes like muscle memory. It's like reading a new language essentially. And yeah, and I love DevOps because it's so varied. Like, it's not front-end development, and it's not writing applications. You're not writing an application. You're just writing applications to you're just writing applications to essentially, no, the software developer, is writing applications. You're just you're writing scripts to build the application that they've wrote, and to ensure that application is secure, and to deploy infrastructure to actually host the application. You're doing all of that, and you need to patch the infrastructure. There's a lot of things, right? And that's what I found when I was doing my CCNA stuff and network stuff. I was bored. It was just, I felt like I wasn't doing anything new, or I was learning, but I wasn't like captivated by what I was doing. But with DevOps, every day I'm doing stuff. Like this week, I've been implementing some infrastructure using Pulumi, and I've been writing that from scratch. So, I even went to a Pulumi conference as well this week, and just getting started. Did it with my work colleague. That was really good fun. So, you get involved in all these kind of things, and I love the flexibility within my role. I love that I can work from home. I love that, there's good pay. You get paid because of the skill set, because it's a niche one. And, you get paid because of those things. Someone's just asked a question, actually. I'm going to just say that that's probably the end of the podcast. And what I'll do is I'll just answer this question. And it says it's by someone called Scrafty. And they've asked, when can I tell if I'm ready to start sending out applications for junior DevOps roles? That's a really good question, actually. So I applied for 3 junior DevOps engineer positions. That was it. And out of the 3, I got to final stage interviews with 2 of them. And the first one, I got to the final stage interview for all 3, but I didn't make it in the first one. So the first one I applied to just by itself. So I'd been doing the Udemy courses that are in the description, and I'd only started it. I'd probably say I was 25% into each of those Udemy courses. And I thought, okay, I'm going to apply to a junior DevOps engineer position. So I applied to it, made it through to final stage, but didn't get it. And then I made the decision that while I was just starting the courses, I was ready to test the market. So don't wait until you've 100% into a course. There's no point. You might as well actually just take the plunge, apply to a couple. If you make it through, you make it through. If you don't, you get the feedback. Otherwise, you're just waiting for that time where you think you're ready. You're never ready for anything, personally. So I literally applied to the one job when I was 25% into my Udemy courses. At that time, I literally only had a bit of knowledge in pipelines. I didn't have any knowledge in Docker, Kubernetes, or anything. I didn't have a full understanding. I knew of it, but I didn't really have an understanding. And the feedback I got from that first job that I applied to Junior DevOps, I was told that, okay, Tish, do some more, not research, but do some more, finish your courses. They basically said, finish your courses and pick a cloud provider and stick with it. So I chose Azure. 6 months later, I applied for 3 jobs. I ended up withdrawing from one because they wanted me to be in the office like 4 times a week. I was like, no, that's not competitive with the market. And then the 2 that I applied to, one was 100% remote, and the other was where I'm currently working, where I go into the office 2 days a week, and then the other 3 days I'm working from home. As a junior, I wanted to be able to interact with my colleagues and stuff and get more like learning in person. So that's why I opted for that one. But also there was other reasons. But essentially, I made it through to the final stage. I, negotiated a bit on my salary, and that was it. And I got the offer. I actually got the offer for the one where I'm currently working before I finished my final stage interview for the other job, and I decided to decline them and not progress any further. So I'd say go and do your course, go and do your courses and apply as soon as possible. As soon as you I'd say at least if you're doing the courses in the description, or you're doing any sort of similar courses where you're learning on pipelines, and like Kubernetes is quite advanced, but I'd say if you're learning pipelines, you're learning infrastructure as code, those are the main 2 things that any DevOps engineer position you're going to want to need. The containerization aspect is a real bonus, but you'll learn that sort of through on the job anyways, as a junior, that is. So I'd say as soon as you feel confident enough to either make the switch, if you're switching careers or anything, then just apply. It doesn't matter if you don't have like 100% like knowledge, as long as you can demonstrate that you are doing X, Y, and Z, the right company will admire you and hire you. If the company finds that you don't have experience, they should be able to advise you. And if they can't do that, then that company wasn't meant to be in the first place. That's the way how I see it. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Scrafty. And that's going to take us to the end of this podcast officially. And if you guys, if you want to recommend future videos, then let me know. I'm going to be recording a week in the life of a DevOps engineer soon. So that'll be a video coming up shortly. And thank you guys for listening. And if you're listening on Spotify, please give the podcast a thumbs up. And if you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe and please hit the notifications bell so you can be notified when a new video is up. Thank you guys, and bye.